Okay, let's get this show on the road. Hello and welcome back to the MMA Girl Podcast for those who are listening on all the podcasting platforms that I'm on. Welcome back to the MMA Girl Podcast hosted by me, Jess, the MMA Girl. We are back for another episode, and there are a lot of things to unpack this week because, of course, I didn't get a chance to talk about UFC 316. The last time we spoke, we were just coming into UFC 316, so I didn't get a chance to talk about that last week. And we've just come off UFC's Atlanta card, which happened on Saturday, which there's a lot of things to unpack, obviously, from that card too. So let's just go straight into UFC Atlanta and all that good stuff and get your guys's experience watching UFC Atlanta as well as my own, because I think it was a very interesting card, to say the least. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I recently did some videos on my TikTok talking about Kamaru Usman because he, of course, during the pre-fight presser, was very explicit and sure of his path to victory, his road to the title, if you like, taking some words from the UFC's lingo. And, of course, a lot of people were alarmed because he went into some detail saying, basically, as you might have heard, that he wanted to beat Buckley, which was the first obstacle to go over, and then go on to beating the champion at the time, which could be Islam, could be Jack. And once he got the belt, he is then planning to vacate and move up to middleweight to beat the champion, which could be Khamzat Chimaev or it could be Duplessis. And of course, he says if it's Khamzat, that will, be Khamzat Usman too. I can finish what I started and get my revenge back. 1-1, etc. And then if it's Duplessis, he then said we could do maybe a cut in Africa, being as I'm from Nigeria and he's from South Africa. So there's a lot of opportunities that could be coming out of that fight. But before any of that happens, of course, he has to get there. And I was talking about my worries for his very lengthy plans in the UFC, seeing as he is 38 and his bad knees have always been I think, the bane of his career, of course, seeing as the last few years have been very tough for him due to his knees. But I think we need to squash that idea because his knees. He basically, I think Kamaru didn't want to say before the fight happened that his knees were fine now. He might have little niggles in his knees. You can't have bad knees and then no longer ever feel bad knees again. I think once you've got bad knees, you've got bad knees. That could be an error on my part to think that, but I think you'll always have niggling knees. His knees will be a little more fragile than other people's knees, especially young bucks like Buckley. But I think his knees are fine, and I think that he's letting people believe, and he let people believe before going into the Octagon against Buckley that his knees would be a problem, or that his knees are still a niggling problem that could come up in the fight or could disadvantage him during the fight, which of course did not happen. Kamaru Usman got the win via decision, as did most people on this card. As I'm looking back at it, I didn't realize whilst I was watching, especially the main card, how many decisions there were, but the main card was just full decisions. The two bonuses that were given out on Saturday night came from prelim fights, of course. Wellmaker, I mean, poor Chris Martino, coming back after a long hiatus away from the UFC, some difficulties in his life, his personal life, etc., coming off of his UFC cut the last time we saw him. So giving Chris an opponent like Wellmaker is basically saying you're allowed back, but this is going to be hard and you may not like it. And I think that this was just a challenge for Wellmaker to get over, but he got the bonus, of course, for his amazing KO against Chris Moutinho, and of course Cody Durden versus Josh Oshua also finished with a second round KO. We then had Philip Rowe winning by KO against Lusa. So basically all the KOs came from the prelim fights. So the rest of the fight card was great. I do want to talk about the whole Bellato Paul Craig situation, of course, from a spectator's standpoint. And I think, guys, I need your advice, I need your opinions on this, because what I saw was what most people are saying they saw, which was Bellato getting that illegal kick whilst Paul Craig was on the floor, complaining to the ref that was an illegal kick, and then falling backwards, pretending, I don't want to say the word pretending, I would say simulating a situation where he was knocked out. Now, the problem with that is as most scientists would say, I think there has been, and I'll try and insert a video if I can find it. There has been in the UFC, or not in the UFC, but another fighting promotion that I saw a video of, delayed knockouts. That can happen.
Your hair back and you're eating a jab at the same time.
Oh, got a big right.
Naaman timed it, and Naaman has stacked him.
Whoa! Out of nowhere, a big, long right hand on the tip of the jaw.
Now, I think, scientifically speaking, I can't really speak on what scientists would say, but I think that is possible. But in this occasion, in this case, I don't believe that's what happened. And I don't want to say Bellato's a cheat or that he'd lie or etc. You know, he didn't get what he wanted, because most people, if they were wanting to simulate a KO having been knocked out by an illegal move, they're looking to get the win by disqualification. Now, this is not what happened, because the fight was in less than 1 round. So unfortunately, that's not how that works. You have to have at least 1.5 rounds if it's a three round fight, in order for that to be a disqualification. That being said, how did the ref then end the fight? Because why would he have ended the fight? He would have just been able to remove a point from Paul Craig and continue the fight. But as you could see, Bellato was screaming, pretending then to wake up when the ref came to him after having told off Paul Craig, goes to Bellato, who then wakes up and then continues to complain. But also before complaining, he woke up and tried to fight the ref. I didn't really understand what was going on. I was like, are you trying to pretend that you don't know where you are? Are you trying to pretend that you thought the ref waking up was Paul Craig on top of you? Like, what is the thought process here? Like, what are you trying to say? And I did not get it. I just did not understand. So for me, Bellato did something wrong here, looking for something that he was not able to get, and he didn't get what he wanted in the end. So I'm kind of internally satisfied that he didn't get what he wanted. But I'm very disappointed for Paul Craig, because, of course, as you know, this fight was scheduled for UFC's Burns versus Morales fight night at the Apex, originally on the main card. Bellato, he got herpes, late diagnosis. That's okay. Doctor stoppage before the fight. That can happen. And of course, the most important thing is that for him to recover from his illness and then come back in full health. So that was fine. Paul Craig got onto his podcast saying, you know, we brought down a whole team of people to Vegas. We'd actually plan on filming a podcast episode there. We'd actually plan on filming many things. And also he had his team for his fight camp. So his sort of disappointment when the fight was cancelled wasn't just for himself, but all the people that had come to Vegas with him, seeing as he's not from the US. So there's a lot of moving parts when a fighter has to change everyone's plans. But of course, they got a hugely quick turnover. We were told they were going to be in Atlanta on Kamaru, Usman and Buckley's card, which is great. And unfortunately, they didn't get onto the main card because the main card was already probably planned since then. So they got a feature prelim. That's great. I was very disappointed that after all those obstacles to get to UFC Atlanta, to get to the point where the fight is going to happen, that we get 1 round. So not even 5 minutes, 4 minutes and something seconds of just not a bad fight up until that point. But that legal move plus Bellato's behavior after that, I just can't back and I can't get my head around, and I don't know what's happening. I don't know if Bellato, as of right now, as I'm saying this right now, I don't know if when this is going to come out, he would have said something, but I don't know if he said something already, and I don't think so. And I'm kind of disappointed for Paul Craig, because in his post-fight interview, of course, people were asking him, so if this is the last time we see you in the Octagon, what would you like to be remembered during your UFC tenure? And I was just like, what? Don't say that. Just don't say that to me. Paul Craig is not done. I don't think this will be the last time we're seeing Paul Craig, because I don't think any fighter, even with, you know, a long career like Paul Craig, saying, I'm going to hang my gloves off now. He's younger than Kamaru Usman, guys. So don't say, if this is the last time we get to see him. This will not be the last time we see Paul Craig. Scotsmen have grit and determination. And if anything, I think this will just push him to ask for another fight as soon as possible. And I'd like to know what Dana White thinks of this situation. I hope that in a couple days, when UFC goes to Baku in Azerbaijan, I hope that Dana White's present, and I hope that they're able to ask him what he thinks of the situation and what he thinks went down. And at some point, I hope they're able to conclude what's going on, because there's a lot of speculation over, did Bellato cheat? Was Paul Craig in the wrong or the right? Was the ref right to stop the match? Was it no contest? Was it DQ? I'd like to know what the whole thought process is and what the UFC think of what happened, because that's kind of an interesting thing. Of course, everyone on the internet is saying that it was a fake knockout, and I agree with people when they say that, but I don't want to say that I endorse that, because I don't know what happened, and there's always two sides of a story. So I'd rather hear what other people who were there, or other people that know a bit more about what happens, are going to be able to say before making my conclusion on that. But in any case, I hope that Dana White, seeing as he's of course on boxing duty, UFC duty, slap power duty, I hope that he is able to be in Azerbaijan on Saturday for UFC Baku, Khalil Roundtree versus Jamal Hill, in order to maybe answer a few questions on that, because I think that's, as if I was a reporter over there, which one day hopefully I will be, I would definitely have asked that question, because I'd love his point of view on that, because Dana White doesn't usually mince his words. He goes straight in for it. So if he wants to say something about the issue, he will, and if he's got his opinion formed on that issue, I hope he gives it. So that's what I have to say on the Paul Craig Bellato situation. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below of that situation. Did you think that Bellato was being nasty and cheating, or do you think that it was a late reaction KO and that he is completely innocent of all charges? Let me know. As for the main card, I got most predictions correct. I didn't bring my prediction videos out, of course. I didn't predict publicly this card, so I'm not lying when I say I got my predictions correct. I just did. I got it wrong, however, when it came to Kamaru Usman, of course, because I didn't have faith in Kamaru Usman. Not that I didn't have any faith in him, but I didn't expect him to win in that manner. And of course, Rose Namajunas, I didn't think she'd win either. But the rest of the card I got correct, because we started this card, of course, with another fight that's been delayed so many times. Umar Sy, the Frenchman, going up against Manyfield. Now, looking at the face-to-faces on Friday, you could tell that Manyfield was a lot smaller than him, a lot less imposing, smaller reach, etc. They don't make a difference to their fight. Umar Sy lost his 0 on Saturday night, and I'm sure he'll be very upset about that. We may be seeing him again in the near future, possibly in September, because of course UFC are coming to Paris, so I don't think Umar Sy is going to want to miss that. But this fight, of course, went to a decision. The fight we saw and the fight on paper, there's so much of a difference, which is why I think it must be tiresome and horrible to be a judge on some of these fight cards, because when you look at the stats for Umar Sy versus Manyfield, you could definitely tell that Umar Sy should have won this fight. He got one of the takedowns he attempted out of the 5 he attempted. Manyfield didn't attempt any takedowns. And in terms of total significant strikes, Manyfield got 29 out of 86 landed. Umar Sy got 34 out of 96 significant strikes landed. So I'm not really sure what the judges based themselves off of. Of course, they based themselves off of what they saw, but the stats said otherwise. Anyway, that's what I have to say on that fight. Umar Sy lost his 0, so good luck to Umar Sy on his fight in September. I'm predicting he'll be in Paris in September. But a good win for Alonzo Manyfield. I think he must be happy to get that on his record. So I think he'll be happy to be back in the win column against someone that everyone expected to beat him. So that's a cool thing. Abdul Malik versus Cody Brundage. Honestly, a lot of illegal strikes and illegal moves on this card, because of course Cody got knocked down by an illegal knee from Malik, and so instead of this being a win via TKO, this was a win via decision, despite not going to the third and final round, or the end of the third and final round. So of course, Malik being one of Eric Nixick's students, Eric Nixick had a lot of work to do on Saturday night. He had 3 or 4 fighters on the card, so a lot of work to do. But if the win's a win, he didn't lose his 0. I think Malik performed brilliantly against Cody Brundage, and I think Cody Brundage, I was expecting more from him. He did, of course, fight his fight, but he was still mostly fighting Malik's fight. So a lot of the striking he was doing were more more defensive than attacking. And I just felt like Mansour had the control most of the time throughout the fight. So a well-deserved win for Mansour, even if he didn't get the TKO that he wanted it to be. He still has his 0. He's still at 9-0. So yeah, good for him. I think Cody Brundage will have to go back to the drawing board a little bit, see what he needs to improve. Hopefully we'll see him soon. Another Cody, of course, on the card was Cody Garbrandt, our no love Garbrandt, who is coming back off of a long hiatus from the UFC, coming up against Barcelos. Not an easy comeback fight, and it turned out, of course, not to go in Cody's way because, of course, Barcelos won that fight. It wasn't a very exciting fight. It didn't really inspire me. I was quite sad to see Cody Brundage come back in that way because we expected more from him. New face tattoo, new look, new hair. We expected a new character to be unlocked for Cody and maybe some new skills in the ring. He didn't seem like he had ring rust at all, but in the Octagon on Saturday night, it just wasn't his fight. Barcelos, he can be a little bit unpredictable in the good sense of the word and in the bad sense of the word, because Barcelos does have a tendency of aimlessly striking his opponent, sometimes then getting caught. And Cody was able to catch him a few times whilst he was aimlessly striking, but that didn't do enough to get the win here. And I just think Cody needs to try again, because I did like his combat style originally. So I would love to see a comeback for the original Cody that we saw getting UFC belts and winning against TJ Dillashaw and winning against some legends in the bantamweight division. So I hope one day that we'll see Cody come back. He's not a bad fighter, and we want that real Cody to come back if ever it's possible. But congratulations to Barcelos for his win over Cody Garbrandt. I think that he will be happy to put that on his record. Next up we had Petrosky versus Shabazian. Shabazian got that win, of course, by decision. Wasn't very exciting either, of course. Shabazian, I expected him to win. Another Eric Nixick student. So as soon as I see Eric Nixick, I do tend to believe that he has a way of training his fighters that is very complete, very strict, and very well done. He has a great team behind him and a great way of going into every fight camp for his fighters. So I respect enormously Eric Nixick's way of doing things and his presence for his students. He must have quite a few students. I don't think he's someone who takes on too many, though, because then you won't be able to be in support of your students for each of their fights. But I think that he tries to train as many people as possible without that being too much, and I love his style. Of course, him having his whole beef with Sean Strickland, I don't think, of course we don't know, but I don't think that's even impacted his reputation in the fight business, because a lot of people were on his side when it came to Sean Strickland. But also I think that gave him a bit more time to take on some new students, and we will be seeing him a lot more cage side, because he has a lot more students to showcase at the UFC and other promotions. So a good fight for Shabazian. Not an amazing fight. There were quite a few moments where both of them were just not touching each other. I understand for the first round you get used to your opponent in the octagon. You try and judge their reach, etc., see how easy it is to strike or not against them. But when it comes to second and third round, you need to pick up the pace a little bit. If the first round was like that, and it just didn't really get that much more exciting. So great win, but not a fight to remember, honestly. Of course, the co-main was Rose Namajunas versus Maverick. Again, Miranda Maverick. I thought she'd win this fight because she's an exciting newcomer. She's won quite a few fights recently. She's a great submission artist. Both girls, Rose and Miranda, are great on the ground and great on the feet, but mostly on the ground for both girls. So I think that's the problem Miranda had, was that she should have tried to stay on the feet a bit more, because Rose Namajunas did have a lot of the defensive takedown. And also, in general, Rose Namajunas got more successful takedowns out of the attempts that she made to take down Miranda Maverick. So Rose, of course, deserved that victory. It wasn't the most riveting fight either, but she got a knockdown in that fight, Rose Namajunas did, in the first round, and we did think that that could be the end for Miranda Maverick. So respect to Miranda for getting up and staying up and not getting knocked down again in that fight. But it was sad to see Rose get a decision because she could have got that KO in there in the first round. That would have been a flawless finish. But she didn't. But she's calling out, of course, Alexa Grasso. So that's a fight to make after UFC Atlanta, I think. So, yeah. It was nice to see Rosie Namajunas back, and it was nice to see her back in the win column. She got the job done. She did what Buckley and Kamaru Usman sort of symbolize as well. She's the more experienced veteran fighter in this fight, and obviously Miranda Maverick coming up as one of the newcomers that are going to be fighting someone as well known as Namajunas and didn't get the job done. The same can be said for, of course, our newcomer Buckley, who has been making waves in the welterweight division. He was tied for top wins in the welterweight division, top win streak, and unfortunately now his win streak is over because Kamaru Usman got the win over Buckley. People seem to forget Kamaru Usman has only lost 4 fights in his career, 3 of which were his last 3 fights. As I said last week, he'd lost out of his last 4 fights, 3 fights. We've not seen Kamaru Usman in 2 years. He, of course, fought Khamzat Chimaev in 2023 in Abu Dhabi. And he, of course, fought Leon Edwards in 2023, which he lost via decision. In 2022, he then lost, of course, via KO to, again, Leon Edwards. And this fight, coming back from a bunch of losses, from a lot of people saying that he wasn't ready, he wasn't at the level of Buckley anymore, he wasn't able to fight someone as exciting and dangerous as Buckley. I can understand why the emotion at the end of the fight came out as he was getting his hand raised. You know, those tears were coming out. The tears were coming out during his fighter interview with Paul Felder, and obviously, of course, at the post-fight presser, he was also very emotional because I think this isn't just a win. This is basically saying, I am still who I think I am. I am still the person that I said I was going to be, and I did what I said I'd come to do. So he's ticked the first box of his plan to go up and fight for the title. And of course, this fight was supposed to be a number 1 contenders fight. So unofficially or officially a number 1 contenders fight. So logically, as he said, he wanted to do matchmaker at the end of his fight. He said, put a Buckley against an Ian Gary, for example. Put me up against the winner of Islam versus Jack. And then we'll see what happens, of course, after that. So I think that he's got a point. Ian Gary Buckley, I would love to see. And of course, if Sean Brady is willing to wait, maybe a Sean Brady and Gary, maybe a Buckley versus Bilal after Bilal fights Shavkat, if that fight's going to happen. Or maybe Shavkat Buckley, or maybe Shavkat will just wait until his opportunity comes around. But I think that Kamaru needs to think about the fact he's not number 1 ranked or number 2 ranked in the welterweight division. You have, of course, Islam Makhachev who's coming up, but the person that lost their belt, Bilal Muhammad, still needs a rematch. If Islam wins against Jack Medellina, he'll no longer want that rematch. But if Islam versus Jack doesn't go the way Islam wants it to, and Jack Della keeps his belt, I think that Bilal will have an argument for a rematch, as most, if not all, champions would ask for. Now, if that was going to be the case, I would put up Bilal Muhammad versus Shavkat end of the year. That way we'll be able to see Jack, Islam, Bilal, Shavkat for number 1 contender spot, but not really. Because, of course, if Islam wins, as I said, Bilal, even if he wins his fight against Shavkat, he won't want to be number 1 contender. So then comes in Sean Brady, who has said famously he's willing to wait, and that he doesn't mind another fight, for example, against Ian Gary, whilst he's waiting for his title shot. So he's not rushed for his title shot. I think you're more than likely going to see Shavkat because he's a more rushed individual for his title shot. Islam's, of course, getting his title shot. It's been confirmed, and Kamaru really wants this title shot. So we may be seeing Islam Jack, and then the winner of that fight fighting Kamaru, because Kamaru has that GOAT status. Kamaru has that veteran power that I believe, honestly, that the UFC needs to still take into consideration when choosing the next fighter for a title shot. They may have a discussion with him and say, listen, we need you to go through Shavkat first because he was the number 1 contender to begin with. Or after all these years that Sean Brady has been asking for a fight, give him that fight, and then we'll determine number 1 contender, and then you'll have your fight against Islam or Jack. I think that's how that should go. Anyway, I heard Kamaru said, "This is what you guys want from me, entertaining fights, dominant victories, etc., etc." I agree with the dominant victory because, of course, Buckley, what the hell? I did not expect that at all. I did not think, coming from an American wrestler, 'cause you don't forget, Buckley has come from wrestling first. Buckley is not a striker. Buckley is a very dominant striker. Buckley has a huge back. Buckley, when he hits someone, when he's striking and jabbing his opponents, when that jab connects, you're on the ground. That is for sure. However, if Buckley doesn't have his striking power, then he has, of course, his wrestling, which is his forte, which is his main basis for going into MMA was from wrestling. I recommend any of you guys who missed it to go and watch his episode of the Mighty Cast with DJ, because he explained where he was coming up from, and he also did the interview alongside his current coach and his main coach, his brother, as he calls him, someone who's been training with for years, where they met in wrestling. And so I was surprised to see Kamaru, not the fact that Kamaru is not a good wrestler. Kamaru is, in my opinion, one of the best wrestlers in the UFC, if not the best American wrestler in the UFC. I'm saying American because, of course, he is from Nigeria originally, but he did most of his wrestling in America. And I believe that despite all the criticism towards American wrestling right now, seeing as, of course, we've got Dagestani wrestling, we've got Georgians, we've got people that are from around the world that are much better than American wrestlers. Let's not lie. But Kamaru Usman is one of the top wrestlers in the company. And I think that no one should forget that he went toe-to-toe with Khamzat Chimaev, didn't get submitted, didn't get KO'd, didn't get TKO'd. He stayed 3 rounds with a monster who, in about 17 seconds, had Kamaru on his back. But Kamaru didn't give in, didn't get submitted. So let's not forget how much of a good wrestler Kamaru is. But I did not expect that for Buckley to be that worn down by Kamaru. Honestly, I did not expect that. So I'm very surprised. Buckley, of course, taking his win on the chin. I love Joaquin Buckley. I think he's a great fighter. I think he deserves all the success that he's going to be getting. I think that putting him up against a Kamaru Usman, even himself, he said before the fight happened, he was starstruck. He was like, man, I'm facing off Kamaru Usman. Like, the idea that he was in a fight against Kamaru was just starting to clock into his head. So he's a young guy. He's got a lot of time to improve any of the things he needs to improve in the octagon, and he'll be back and better than ever. He's bounced back after many things have put him down. He's not one to be put down by a single loss like this one. Yes, it's disappointing he's lost his win streak. Yes, it's disappointing because this fight was one of the biggest fights of his career, if not the biggest fight of his career. But he will come back. Buckley is very much respected now and has been for the last few fights because, of course, some people are starting to understand how good he is. But he's just not Kamaru Usman level, and we shouldn't think that guys should be Kamaru Usman level, because Kamaru's on another planet, guys. We forgot Kamaru Usman is not who you think he is. And I think that even though either Jack Della Maddalena or Islam Makhachev, they're going to be huge challenges for Kamaru Usman, but I don't see him being beaten up in the first round and end of story. I think that even if he might lose to an Islam Makhachev, for example, he'll put up a great fight. It will be like Alexander Volkanovski versus Islam Makhachev, their first fight, because Volkanovski, with all the respect that we can give him, that is insane. He was able to go toe-to-toe with Islam Makhachev, the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, and wasn't submitted or KO'd. Of course, in the second fight, he did sustain, unfortunately, a huge KO. But the first fight that he had with Islam wasn't that bad. He was very close, and he sustained some injuries, Islam, that most people aren't able to give to Islam Makhachev. And now seeing what Islam's capable of, you can even more respect Alexander Volkanovski for having 2 fights with him and going 5-4 rounds with him in his first fight between them, guys. So Kamaru Usman, I think that would be the same. If he doesn't win over Islam Makhachev, I think that he'll give all of his energy, he'll give everything he can give, and I think Islam Makhachev won't be able to make a mockery out of Kamaru Usman. But I'd like to see Kamaru in the octagon with Islam Makhachev or Jack Della for the title fight, because I think he deserves another title shot. There are a lot of fights like that recently where you get Michelle Morales versus Burns being the veteran older guy, 38 years old, coming up against a guy that's 26 years old who is insanely unstoppable. We got the same thing with Joaquin Buckley and Kamaru Usman, and a lot of people, of course, seeing Burns get knocked out as easily as he did against Michelle a few weeks ago, people were saying that's exactly what's going to happen to Kamaru Usman. It's the end of Usman. I saw people in my comments on TikTok saying his plan should be just retire after the Buckley fight. What are you going to be saying now? He just won over 5 rounds. He won every round. I don't see how Buckley would have won a round in that fight. 137 total strikes landed by Kamaru Usman versus the 51 total strikes that Buckley was able to land, because Buckley couldn't get those jabs to land. Being the bigger individual, Buckley, for me, he should have got those strikes in. He wasn't able to. 4 out of 13 of his takedown attempts from Kamaru were achieved. And of course, that's all you need. One takedown attempt succeeded, and you've got your opponent on the ground. You've got all that control time. So, I mean, Buckley completely annihilated. So people are going to have to rethink their opinion on Kamaru Usman, even myself, because this has woken people up. And I think that's why he was probably overwhelmed with the emotions of being able to prove everyone wrong. And I think that's completely justified. So congratulations to Kamaru. I quite enjoyed UFC's Atlanta card, even though we got mostly decisions on that fight card, and I didn't mind it at all. So it was better than UFC's Vegas card 107, Aaron Blanchfield versus Barber, because of course we didn't even get the main event to begin with. So I'm happy. This week we're bouncing back on UFC Baku. It's not like we just got that card and then we've got a week off. No, we're bouncing back straight away. I'll be doing a separate video on UFC Baku, I think, this week. So tune in at the end of the week for a separate episode on UFC Baku. But let's go over some UFC news, some MMA news, and all that good stuff before we end this podcast. And before, of course, I move on to the latest news, don't forget to let me know what you guys thought of the UFC's Atlanta card in general. Did you guys enjoy it? Are there some fights that you're really happy with? And what do you think of good old Kamaru Usman getting the win over Buckley? What are your thoughts on that? Let me know in the comments down below. So let's go into some news. I watched Dirty Boxing's second pay-per-view with, of course, the presence of John Jones. John Anek's brother was commentating. Mike Perry was on commentating booth. We had Caio Borralho, who was commentating in Portuguese. Yoel Romero doing some commentating as well. It was a star-studded event. Of course, a lot of fighters were invited. We saw Jared Cannonier. A lot of people I didn't expect to see. So in terms of the crowd, in terms of the feeling inside of the I don't even want to call that arena. I think it's like a warehouse type thing. I liked it. I liked the vibe. It gave up a bit of a karate combat vibe, in the sense that it's more house shows that are doled up. And I like it. It's a lot more, as it's called, Dirty Boxing Championship. It's not supposed to be glamorous. It's not supposed to be, glitz and glam. It's supposed to be gritty. It's get in there, get the job done and go home. And that's exactly what it is. And we saw Rosenstrike from the UFC make his Dirty Boxing debut in the main event and get the KO. That must have boosted his confidence, of course, since he last was seen by the UFC and by us as fight fans. And I recommend tuning into Dirty Boxing's fighting events. I like it. I like what they're doing. It's not just because I like fighting, because obviously I do understand that I'm a bit biased when it comes to fighting. I just love watching MMA. I love watching fighting. I love watching boxing. I love all that stuff. So maybe I liked it because I like that. But as you guys are watching this podcast, this must mean we're like-minded individuals. And so if you haven't tuned in to Dirty Boxing's fighting events, they've only done 2 for now. They're free on YouTube right now. So you can go and watch the 4-hour pay-per-view from Dirty Boxing from last Friday's event. And I recommend you do, because it's not too bad. No, the word is not too bad. It's excellent. It's fun. It's gritty. It's, it's not your run-of-the-mill event, and it's well financed. Of course, John Jones being one of the lead investors now in Dirty Boxing. And I'm not even going to go into the comments he made on Tomassimo, because, of course, a lot of people were asking him whilst he was arriving to the event, does this mean you're retired officially now? The answer was no. Does this mean we're going to see Tomassimo versus John Jones? He said he needs to come to Dirty Boxing to fight me. So I'm not even going to go into it because it's just funny. Whatever. So I'm going to go into some of the fight news that I've heard from the last 2 weeks since I wasn't there last week to talk to you guys. Of course, UFC 316 happened and we got probably the best performance from Merab Dvalishvili that we've ever seen. And he's currently in Georgia with Nina Drama, who he is invited to Georgia, and they're having a little tour of the country, meeting his family, his friends, meeting fans. It looks great. And Merab is such a pure, I was going to say innocent, but that's not the word because he's a fighter, but he's such a pure soul. And he's just nice. He's just a really nice person. You can tell he's just so, you know, people love him for a reason, and he gives back to his fans, he gives back to his country, he gives back to his friends. As he said, of course, after his fight last week, he said, I'm giving half of my win bonus to Aljamain because Aljamain just got married and I want him to have some money for his honeymoon and for him and his wife just as a present. Aljo is not, of course, short of money, but that's just a great way, of course, showing his love to the people who are around him. And he, of course, gives a lot of credit to Aljamain Sterling for his come up at the UFC and his skills. Of course, Aljamain Sterling being someone who has fought Sean O'Malley before, he was, of course, able to bring in his expertise on the fight between Merab and Sean the first time. The second time, he was probably able to help a lot with his fight camp and still give him some tips about what he thought about Sean O'Malley. Merab was just that much better than he was in the first fight between himself and Sean just said it himself. I was way better than I was between September and now. I'm way better now than I was in September. He prepared insanely hard for his fight. He gave up smoking, he gave up a lot of things, he secluded himself in his workout/warehouse area where he has a true to size Octagon in his warehouse where he's able to be just secluded outside of the city life and be at his home. And unfortunately, Sean O'Malley, that did not turn out to be the key to victory for you. But what I'd love to say is that we can give credit to Sean O'Malley for his perseverance and his mental capacity, because after a fight like that, you shouldn't feel humiliated, but it's easy to feel humiliated because you get so much hype around you and you get so much pressure put on your shoulders to win this time. And he also said himself that he wanted to KO Merab. So coming out of a fight like that and losing again, it's not easy to take on the chin, and he took it on the chin. And according to Tim Welch, his coach, they may be moving up to featherweight with Sean. It's not confirmed yet, of course. We may be seeing Aljamain Sterling fight Sean O'Malley again, because, of course, Aljamain's moved up to featherweight. Sean O'Malley's looking to move up to featherweight. However, Henry Cejudo has then, of course, challenged Sean O'Malley to a fight since we last saw his ever so meme-worthy sequence where he was talking to Sean whilst he was being interviewed, saying, I think you suck. I need a tune-up. Let's get in the octagon together. So Henry Cejudo doubled down on that recently and said, I still think you suck and I still want to tune up. So why not? So we may be seeing after UFC 316, Henry Cejudo versus Sean O'Malley, Merab Dvalishvili versus Corey Sandhagen. Corey Sandhagen, who looked less than impressed about the fact that he's going to be fighting Merab, not because he doesn't want a title shot, but because he knows what's going to happen when he gets in the octagon with Merab, because he saw what happened to Sean. You could tell that on his face. He was just like, yeah, I'm getting my title shot, but well, you know, I'm not going to win. He looked really not nervous or timid. He just looked like pissed off that the fight we just saw between Merab and Sean is basically a preview to what Corey Sandhagen has to expect in his fight against Merab, unless Corey finds a strategy that works to counter Merab's fighting style. But anyway, that's the fight that's going to be made after UFC 316. Of course, we're getting Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison's coming back after her victory against Juliana Pena to face the one and only Amanda Nunes, who is also coming back after her retirement and wants to get her belt back, wants to get her glory back. And she says, Amanda Nunes, that she'll stay in the UFC for as long as possible. This is going to be a big fight because Kayla Harrison's not going to be easy to beat. But I think Amanda Nunes is, if anyone, the one to beat her, because I don't see anyone on the UFC's bantamweight women's division who could beat Kayla Harrison right now, apart from a returning Amanda Nunes. So that's the fight we're going to be seeing. Of course, Kevin Holland versus Colby Covington was mentioned, because Kevin Holland won his fight against Vicente Luque in a very amazing, shocking manner. I did not expect that, seeing this. Vicente Luque is a BJJ back belt. Not saying Kevin Holland's not good on the ground, but I just didn't think that Vicente would not be able to land any significant strikes at all. Of course, being that Kevin is so long limbed, and that Vicente was a lot shorter and a lot shorter limbed, he wasn't able to gauge that distance and land any strikes that were significant enough to knock down a Kevin Holland and get him onto the ground and submit him. So unfortunately, that's what happened in reverse. Vicente Luque got knocked down and submitted. So Kevin Holland, all respect to him, amazing fight on his part. He wants Colby Covington. I say go for it, because that's the best way to bring Colby back to the UFC. He's not gone, of course, but we've not seen him since he got hammered by Joaquin Buckley. And I think that that's the best way for him to come back against a Kevin Holland who is rather unpredictable, a lot easier a fight than Joaquin Buckley. And that's, of course, what Kevin Holland said. He wants an easy fight. He wants those guys that are almost retired. He wants older guys. He wants easy fights. So easy money, easy fight, wants Colby. Why not? So coming off of UFC 316, we then saw on the feature prelim, Joshua Van getting a beautiful KO victory over his opponent. And of course, we heard that following this main card for UFC 316, that Royval, his opponent for UFC 317, happening on the 28th of June, has pulled out. Manon Cap has pulled out due to a foot injury. So Joshua Van, who is coming off a victory in less than a week ago, is going on to fighting Royval on the main card of UFC 317. Now, that is insane turnover. Of course, we've already seen fighters take fights on short notice, but this is not just taking a fight on short notice. This is coming off of a full camp and a fight, and then coming 3 weeks later into another fight. So he's young, he's worthy of it, he's capable. So Joshua Van, all praise to him. Royval has famously said that he's his favorite and most exciting flyweight at the moment. So I'm quite happy for Royval that he's getting a great opponent, because sometimes they're not able to scramble and find someone that quickly that fills the boots of the person that is injured. So I believe that Joshua Van is the greatest choice that the UFC could have made to replace Manon Cap in his fight against Royval. And I'm so excited to see Royval versus Manon Cap on the 28th. We'll get into that next week when I film my last episode of the month next week. We'll be going into the UFC 317 on the 28th of June. And yeah, I can't wait. So I don't know if you guys heard about MVP's fight against Cannonier that has just been announced for UFC's 319 pay-per-view in Chicago, Illinois. Of course, at 219, we're going to be seeing UFC middleweight champion Dricus du Plessis take on Chimaev in a bout that will determine the greatest of the middleweight division between these guys. And on that fight card, we're going to be seeing now Jared Cannonier versus MVP. One of the fights I just didn't expect to see, honestly, because we've already heard rumors that MVP might have been put against a Carlos Prates or something like that. But he's staying at middleweight. He obviously last fought Shara Bullet, which he was able to successfully come home with the win. So now we're going to be seeing him take on a Jared Cannonier, who is also coming off a very successful win against Robocop, which happened at the Apex in the start of the year. And again, that was an unexpected victory for Cannonier, seeing as he's well over 40 now. But MVP versus Cannonier, that is the last fight I would have expected. And Cannonier, as I said to you guys, was present at Mike Perry's Dirty Box Championship 2, and he basically said, yeah, it's another fight, another challenge, another hurdle to go over. So I'm not sure what he thinks of this fight. We've not heard from MVP yet either, but I'm excited. I think, it's very unexpected, but it's exciting at the same time. So I'm very excited for that fight. Going on to UFC Noche, which is of course happening in September in Texas. That's been confirmed. So UFC Noche is not happening outside the US, and it's not happening at the Sphere. So both of those have been eliminated from possibilities. UFC Noche is happening in Texas, and we are hearing word that the fight between Diego Lopez and John Silva is very much happening for the main event of this card. Now, it's not been announced yet, but I think they're waiting to announce this fight, because when this fight is officially announced, people are going to go crazy. The idea of Diego Lopez taking on John Silva, of course, Diego coming off of a loss against Alexander Volkanovski, looking to get back in the win column. Still a very exciting, dangerous fighter, still someone not to be underrated. And of course, John Silva, do I need to say anything more? So this fight, if this happens, because it's apparently already been signed for, but if this happens and it gets announced, it will be for UFC Noche in September in Texas. So that's very exciting. Now, of course, we've seen at UFC 316 a newcomer again from Bellator called Patchy Mix, who came in all guns blazing with a lot to say, and he came up against a Mario Batista, who of course originally was supposed to be fighting Marlon Chito Vera. Then on short notice, you get Patchy Mix coming in, which excited a lot of people because he was this new, exciting prospect at the UFC, former Bellator bantamweight champion, undefeated, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, in the Octagon, we saw a Patchy Mix that was nothing like what we saw at Bellator. And I think that people just didn't remind themselves, and I myself am one of those people, the level at the UFC is not the same. We can't take fighters from Bellator or from PFL and say, here, Yair Rodriguez, here, Mario Batista. They're not the best in their divisions at the UFC, but they're high-level elite athletes at the UFC, and the UFC is the highest level of MMA in the world. So when you get people like that come into the UFC, whether or not they have a lot of confidence about their fighting style or about their abilities in the Octagon, that does not translate in the Octagon when the fight happens and when the bell is rung. So this is another example of another Bellator fighter coming in. I'm not going to name Michael Chandler because he's had a legendary UFC career still. He's had some great fights. He's won some great fights, but he's lost some very important fights to his career. And one thing that Michael Chandler always does is comes back because he's mentally very clocked in. So he comes back and says, yeah, I lost that fight, but I want this, this, and this, because he knows what he's worth, or thinks he knows what he's worth, because he may sometimes ask for a bit too much. But I'm not going to put Michael Chandler in that mix. But when you come into the UFC now, especially in 2025, and you make people believe that you are something that you're not, or you think to be something that you are not, it's very disappointing when that doesn't translate into the Octagon. And all respect to Mario Batista for piecing him up and showing Patchy Mix what it's like in the UFC, because he was not ready for that. And I think that he'll think twice before saying anything like that about his next opponent in the UFC. Hopefully he'll get a fight as soon as possible to show us what he is worthy of doing. Because I think one thing that was disappointing for me was I saw Patchy Mix in that fight and I said to myself, he doesn't look confident. He looks shocked. He looks bewildered. He looks like he didn't expect Mario Batista to be that pressurizing and that forward. But when you don't expect your opponent to be of any decency, then that's kind of what you get when you go into an Octagon and your opponent's piecing you up like that. You're just like, how is happening to me? I think he was in shock. But this time around, I think that should open the door for Patchy Mix to understand what the level in UFC is like. At UFC 318, we're having, of course, Dustin Diamond Poirier taking on Max Holloway for the BMF belt in his last dance, his last fight. I keep saying it and I'll say it until the end of my life, I think. But anyway, at UFC 318 in New Orleans, Dustin Poirier's hometown, we're going to be getting that fight, and we're getting a fight between Patricio Pitbull, of course, and Dan Ige. Dan Ige coming off of a win via TKO. Dan Ige on Cloud9 right now. Dan Ige, of course, one of Eric Nixick's students. So I'm very excited to see what Dan Ige will be able to do to a Pitbull, and what Pitbull is going to be able to do with a Dan Ige. So that's a very exciting fight that's going to be happening in not too long, because, of course, we have UFC 317 happening at the end of this month, and UFC 318 happening next month. So I'm very excited to see that, and it's not a very long time, so we don't have long to wait. Recently, Justin Gaethje came out with some statements saying that if his next fight is not for the title, he would be willing to hang up his gloves and call it quits, because he does not believe that he deserves to wait any longer for a title fight. And unfortunately for Justin, there are too many people in line for a title fight at lightweight. Of course, we're seeing the fight between Charles Oliveira and Ilia Topuria happening at the end of this month. And if Ilia wins, as most people think he will, putting him against a Gaethje would make sense. But he's not the number one contender. Arman Tsarukyan is. He's not the second contender in the world. That's Charles Oliveira right now. So I don't know whether UFC had that in mind to begin with. But now that he's saying that if his next fight is not for a title, he's going to retire, I absolutely 100% want UFC to book that fight, because I don't want Justin Gaethje to leave on of course he won his last fight against Fiziev, but I don't want him to leave on that note saying, you know, I'm not getting what I want, so I'm going to retire. He didn't say he's going to hang his gloves up at the UFC. He's just going to retire, because he's not looking to go into any other organization. So that would be such a shame to see a Justin Gaethje leave in that way. So hopefully that won't happen. Hopefully he'll get his title shot, as his manager said, and hopefully the UFC will appreciate that. Of course, Justin Gaethje, as he said, was not obliged to fight Fiziev. He could have said, no, I want to wait for Dan Hooker. I don't want to do this fight camp if it's not for Dan Hooker. But he said, no, I absolutely want to fight. I don't want to let the fans down. I want to put up a good fight. He did put up a great fight against Fiziev. It was amazing to see. Now we're seeing Fiziev, of course, come back this weekend against Bahamondes. Anyway, I agree with him. I mean, he's always been there when the UFC needed him. He even said that the UFC came to his door, knocking on his door, begging him to take the fight against Max Holloway at UFC 300. So that's something to say, seeing as UFC 300 was basically defined by his KO loss to Max Holloway, even though he was on the receiving end of that KO. He said to fight fans that he fought that fight because, of course, UFC begged him to, but he sees that as more of an exhibition fight, not because Max is not a relevant fighter, but because that has no relevancy in his goals in the lightweight division. So I totally get that. Now, is he worthy of a title shot? Definitely. Is he next up in line? Maybe not. But why not give Justin Gaethje what he wants? Because it seems as though Tsarukyan, even though he seems impatient, he looks like he'll wait for a fight. We may see a Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker or a Tsarukyan versus Paddy Pimblett, because the rumors were obviously that Paddy Pimblett was going to take on Justin Gaethje. But if Justin doesn't want another fight, unless it's for the title, then we can scrap that already. So maybe we'll see Paddy Pimblett versus Tsarukyan, or maybe we'll see Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker. In either case, I think that Tsarukyan would fight that fight and not say the same thing as Justin Gaethje. I'm scared that he won't get what he wants, but we'll see. On the last little note on this podcast, I wanted to send out my love and support to Ben Askren and his family. Of course, Ben Askren, we found out last week, is in quite a difficult medical situation right now. He's not in great condition. So as Daniel Cormier said, he's in his hometown at the hospital. He's not gone home yet as of right now, as I'm talking right now. In any case, whether he's gone home or not, I just wish his family and his friends and himself all my best wishes and prayers. Hopefully Ben Askren will pull through. There was a huge tribute slideshow featuring Ben Askren on Saturday night, and I got really scared that he died, because I thought, what is this tribute doing here if he's alive? But we seem to take people for granted until they're gone, and I think that's really important. The UFC is showing love to Ben Askren even though he's not gone, because he still deserves his flowers. So honestly, good luck to his family and good luck to Ben Askren. I hope you make a speedy, full recovery. And that is all I have to say on that note. What did you guys think of UFC 316, as I didn't get to speak to you guys about that last week? And what did you guys think again about UFC Atlanta? I'll be back with a video on UFC Baku Thursday or Friday before the fight night, and I'll see you guys then. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe as usual, and we'll see each other in a couple of days for the breakdown of UFC Baku, Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree. See you guys. Bye.